Hey, Bigpod.
Hey, what?
Red Hat didn't work out for me.
Really?
Yeah. It turns out that the v4l2 loopback plugin that's provided by RPM Fusion, while it does load into the kernel, there's a very fundamental issue.
What is it?
The Linux headers does not exist.
Oh.
Yeah. So, anyways, I went around and I reinstalled like this distro that I used to be well known for. So I have embraced the Purple Penguin, the world's fastest penguin, known as Gentoo. Which, yes, that is a real penguin.
Cue the music.
Hey guys, welcome to No Talks Allowed. I'm your host Josh, and today, while I'm busy compiling Chromium in the course of the background, even though I probably could have compiled it 3 times before we even hit the record button, I have my co-host here with me today, Bigpod.
Hi.
All right, Bigpod. Just to let you know, the temperature of my room has not gone up at all during this entire process, but I am certain that somebody's going to be triggered by our very first news article of the week here, because we have brought to you, once again, security news.
Yes.
Yes, because, in fact, I have quite a few security-related things that are picked up here. But, anyways, it turns out that there are 2 vulnerabilities that were found in the wild that were filed as CVEs, and there's two big ones that are the topic of discussion here. The first one is CEV 2025 and 2025-3052. The other one is CVE 2025 47827. Now, these are both securities concerning secure boot and evil maid attacks, which secure boot came out way back in the day to deal with evil maid attacks, where that's basically just like something that gets injected into the boot chain of your operating system, well, before your operating system even boots. But first of all, before we get describing how these vulnerabilities work, it might be worthwhile, Bigpod, if you could give us an explainer on how a system boots with secure boot.
Okay, so first of all, there are slight differences between Windows and Linux booting. For example, there are bits and pieces in Linux boot that are not there for Windows.
Of course there are.
But the general booting goes as such. UEFI first becomes UEFI bring up, which then at the time also brings up secure boot. This then starts getting handled by UEFI bootloader, which then on Linux goes to shim bootloader. This is the shim that is needed for secure boot, because secure boot checks the shim if it is correct, as the main certificate authority for secure boot is actually Microsoft, and to not have to deal with a whole lot of random drivers for Linux, they just signed a single program,
of course,
that acts as a as a test for everything else. Then shim, instead of secure boot, shim then checks everything else. There is some secure boot there for major drivers, but it's mostly shim doing things. So that's why when you boot, let's say with some random driver you installed, and it shows up this MOK utility. That's actually shim.
Yep.
Going in and asking you for a password for the key, because shim is literally just a shim for secure boot.
I exist here just to do this one thing, and that's it.
Yes, literally, it pretends to be secure boot while actually just talking to secure boot.
Yep.
And that's my best understanding of shim. Now, Windows doesn't have shim because Windows, well, is Microsoft. Microsoft has a bit more hand over what can go in Windows and what not than on Linux, which of course makes sense.
Yep.
Although I would like that people would, like the motherboard manufacturers would pick another Linux forward company for CA. I don't know, like Red Hat. But well, they have picked Microsoft. Microsoft is one of the originators of Secure Boot, UEFI, and all that. Besides Intel and a couple other people or groups.
I think
so
what it is
it makes sense.
I think what it is that Intel proposed UEFI and then Microsoft proposed Secure Boot to go on top of UEFI or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Basically, that hodgepodge that is UEFI is like Intel, Microsoft, and I think Apple had a hand in it, and so on. So, at that point, when shim does its job, it's handed over to grub, so boot process. So, grub is now stage 3 bootloader.
Yep.
At which point, it boots into kernel. If you remember back to the episode with Tomai Zaman of Mono Technologies, we talked about booting for a bit because, well, it's an interesting topic, and he explained it a lot better than me.
Yeah, that's actually overall a very informative episode for like what it takes to get just a Linux kernel running on some devices. So it's worthwhile to listen to at least parts of that episode, but it's also just a really cool episode in general. Now,
it's a two-parter, so both episodes are cool.
Yeah. Now, of course, when we're talking about like this evil maid attack, the evil maid is like a malware toolkit that's injected somewhere in this chain in like some found vulnerability, and it just sits and it just serves up and acting as its own secure boot authoritative device, and then it just which then will allow it to basically have more better than root access to your operating system and be able to just dump something somewhere.
Yeah. It's a device connected to computer. Technically speaking, any device connected to computer that has kernel level access, that can have higher than kernel level access in theory.
Yeah.
Which includes your mouse, but it's over USB, so it's good. There are buses that can have higher than kernel level access.
Yeah. Now, generally, CVE 2025-3052. The first one that I mentioned, is basically just like yet another thing where like I believe secure boot keys got compromised because even this Ars Technica article doesn't really go in depth as to how this works. It just says that this allows somebody to just turn off secure boot and then install malware, which is basically just an evil maid attack. It doesn't really go into that point. Now, the other CVE that I mentioned is basically the same thing, but that is a CVE against shim itself on Linux. Now, if you haven't clicked or opened up the show notes and looked at this Ars Technica article that I have linked in the description yet, Microsoft only fixed one of these CVEs. The other one said they're not bothering with it. Now, if you remember what Bigpod said, it's understandable as to why. Because the second CVE is shim, which was given to us by Microsoft, which basically means that Microsoft signed off on the code for shim. But who is currently maintaining shim? Because apparently it's not Microsoft, because Microsoft is not fixing it.
As far as I know, it's Red Hat, and let's be clear. This is best of our understanding of what is happening. That it is problem with a kernel module, therefore problem on the shim side, not on the side of actual secure boot.
Now
we could be wrong because we do not have the most information needed, or the actual necessary knowledge to actually fully grasp the situation.
Yeah, but I hope that we're at least partially correct on it. And if
Yeah.
Red Hat is involved in the CV at all, we know generally well that Red Hat has to deal with like these government compliance laws that say that when there's something like this, they have to fix it.
To fix it. Yeah.
So it will probably get fixed, and because it's Red Hat, it will be fixed for everybody because that's just what Red Hat does.
Yeah. Josh, you know what?
What's that?
At this point, I'm thinking we should at some point get an actual security person to
We probably
be on
should.
the podcast. Not just me who pretends to be a security person.
I mean, I enjoy cosplaying as a gray hat engineer, but of course, hey, are you a security expert? You think you can explain some of this stuff to us? Join us on the show sometime. I'm certain that Bigpod and you will have an amazing conversation, and it will just go right over my head. But hey, that's why I'm here. Now, Bigpod.
Yeah.
While I was sitting here working on figuring out like what my next distro would be, and in the meantime being Gen 2, which notoriously takes me 2.5 weeks to actually install, you, being a more normal person, sat back and watched a conference, because it is conference season after all.
Yes.
So every week there's going to be a conference until there's not. Well, what'd you watch this time?
Well, I watched I think it's called Worldwide Developer Conference.
That's exactly what it's called.
Oh, good. I remember the acronym.
Yep.
And for those of you who do not know, that's an Apple development conference, which to me is already not that well connected together, but apparently goes together.
Yes, and this is that, and Apple did that thing where they talked about how innovative that they were. Now, obviously, I watched all of 7.5 minutes of this, many of it being clips of not the talks, because it turns out that when Apple does a conference, they go a little hard on transitions.
They're getting better, but I still used to call it content between transitions.
Yeah, so
because the content is more or less a filler between different transitions.
Yeah, so if you haven't watched the Worldwide Developer Conference, I highly recommend.
Or any other Apple conference, because they have 3 in the year and all 3 are made exactly the same way.
Well, anyways, this most recent one that we're talking about here, at least watch the first minute and a half of it. I'm certain that you will be entertained. But anyways,
yes.
they seeing as I enjoyed the transitions more than anything else. I didn't actually watch it. Instead, I just read this morning after article that I have linked in the show notes. But it's an Engadget article. They link to all the relevant things that Bigpod's probably going to talk to us anyway. So what did they actually talk about?
So first off, they told us that they will now have same number for across all their operating systems. So iOS 26, macOS 26, watchOS 26, iPadOS 26. So basically,
yeah, but they're not doing version numbers; they're doing years, right?
Essentially years, but yeah,
Okay.
they have a yearly release cadence anyway, so it kind of just syncs up. It's like Samsung and their phones nowadays, just 26, 25, because it's like really yearly release cadence, so it makes sense. Well, they also released, or will release when it comes out, by the probably toward the end of the year. I believe it's their normal release time, so that's why 26, because for most of 26 it will be using that version. They announced a major UX redesign for basically all of their operating systems.
Oh, okay.
Basically, basically redesigning it using what they called an expressive material called liquid glass. Now, for those of
hold on. So liquid meaning that there's smooth and wonderful transitions. You drag a window around and it's like water flowing across the street. And glass because, I guess, transparency.
yes,
Okay.
so liquid glass, which let's be clear, is a design language, nothing else. But according to them, it's an expressive material.
Oh, okay.
Fancy way of saying things. Yes, it's basically everything. Everything is now more or less transparent. Like Windows did 15 years ago with Vista.
Okay. Now, of course, I Googled this and I did some looking around. And it really is just a design aesthetic where
Yes.
all their like little overlaying windows, even though they're white background in light mode, presumably dark background in dark mode, they have a little bit of transparency with a little bit of blur, which tells me Apple has visited r/Unix porn.
Well, apparently, this design language, this expressive material, is inspired by the what's it called? The operating system for their VR glasses. I don't know on the top of my head. How they named that fork of iPad OS. Which is in itself a fork of iOS.
Even though they're not the same thing, but they are
technically
the same thing.
They are.
At least
it's called. I remember it's called Vision OS.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they that's what happens there. So apparently they decided they're gonna use the same thing here, and apparently, yeah, it actually does look good, especially because everything uses this design language.
I mean, when everything looks uniform, it's just going to look good.
Yeah, if you are trapped in the ecosystem, you're gonna have same design language everywhere. On your Mac, on your phone, on your tablet, on your TV, everywhere.
Which is great until you look to leave.
Yes. At which point you realize you're forever trapped. So they also explained that there will be more foundational on-device models for AI.
Okay.
Where I don't mean artificial intelligence, I mean Apple intelligence.
There's a difference.
I don't know where, but apparently it is. It's their branding, essentially, of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
They call it Apple intelligence. And yes, there was a load of AI talk, of course, because you have, like, for example, on iOS 26, now you finally get call screening.
Oh,
which apparently is a useful feature. I wouldn't know. I don't get calls at all. But somebody who lives in US might know how useful that is. Like you, Josh, for example.
Well, here in the US, we have this wonderful thing called scam callers. Because heaven forbid, none of our phone operators are willing to agree on like a way of presenting this. But like ghost calls, fake calls, or like those wonderful AI calls from like your local police political action committee. Because I get that one all the time. To go with like my Medicare insurance, my and my retirement accounts and so on. It's intended to combat those kind of garbage phone calls. Now, obviously, I don't think it's going to work nearly as well as what they're selling it to be because nothing else has so far, so I'm skeptical.
Well, they also have better hold waiting experience. So especially when you're waiting for a live agent to answer, let's say you're calling your ISP for service. Well, You're put on hold, and you have the beautiful music you dance to for 2 hours. Well, they essentially let the AI listen to the music while you can do something else on your iPhone,
Of course.
and then AI lets you know that agent has said hello.
Yeah. Now, I want to put a footnote in this. As a guy that worked at a call center for a few years, technically, that counts as a dropped call by most call centers. So,
Well,
if I
it will say I'm please hold for
Yeah,
for
I
the
know.
real user.
I know,
or
but
something like that.
But the policy that that like at least in the field that I worked at, which was technical support, I worked technical support for a rather large mobile phone carrier, and they came out with an issue statement when we started seeing like these third-party services basically do that same thing. They straight up said that if somebody's calling in as a representative for somebody while they're waiting on a hold, that counts as a dropped call. And yeah. So
Interesting. We'll see how they will handle it.
You might be playing with some fire on that one. You might be.
Well, we'll see how they handle it. Then there are also changes to macOS. The only one that I listed is the name of the new version, Tahoe.
Yeah, it's Tahoe.
Nothing else, because nothing else was interesting to me.
Hey, I mean, if Apple likes to drive their Chevys, that's fine with me.
Yeah. So now for me, and probably for everybody, most interesting stuff happened in iPad and iPad OS for some reason.
Of course.
Because finally, iPad joins the amazing company of good tablets like Samsung in having an actual windowing system.
Oh. Okay. Now, I know that iPad has supported, like, opening multiple apps at a time.
Yes.
So...
But now you get floating windows.
Oh. Okay.
As many as you want. Your normal floating windows.
This is a glorious new feature. It can't possibly be innovative at all.
It's innovative.
Oh,
It's innovative.
Okay.
They also added, if you're using a floating window, a menu bar at the top.
That can't also possibly
So innovative. And it is a global menu. Like nobody else thought before.
Right. I remember like this specific English company that made like this desktop environment called Unity, which was all about the global menu before everybody else.
And I remember this American company that also has global menus. I think they're like a fruit, and they name their PC operating systems after I live mountain ranges or Great Lakes or something like that in US, like Tahoe.
Yeah.
Because their PC operating system also or desktop operating system also has global menus.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, this sounds very innovative so far.
They also added a better pointer for your mouse.
Oh. Okay.
Now it's more pointy. They said it's more pointy.
Oh, all right.
It used to be a dot or like a circle. Now it's a pointer actually.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we're actually done poking fun at Apple, because
we're not yet. There is more.
We're not yet.
There is not more.
Yeah. If you don't,
this one they're actually innovative. On the level of tablets and phones.
Oh, let's hear
Their
this.
iPad now can do background tasks without doing hacks on side of developers. Something most phones and most tablets still lack.
So, if I have an app update available, you're saying that now I can update that app in the background and not...
Technically, it could do that. I'm not talking about that.
Oh,
I'm talking about, let's say, for example, you were editing a video on your tablet, because that's actually a thing people do.
It's a thing that people do on their iPads, at least. I know that much.
In a DaVinci Resolve,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, an iPad has a PC level CPU. We should remember that.
Yep.
It has the same CPU that's in your MacBook or someone's MacBook. Well, you could also render a video that you just edited. Problem was that if you wanted to then do something else, in most cases you couldn't, because the Resolve had to stay on top.
That is a thing. That is a thing on these mobile devices. Now, there are some things you can do in the background on Android, but it also it's very app dependent.
Yes. Now they added support for background tasks, so you can go out and rendering will still happen. Finally, somebody thought of doing that.
On the mobile device, nonetheless.
Yes.
I don't know if this made it to iPhone, but it's at least there for the iPad.
Probably not, because apparently they're separate operating systems.
Yeah,
apparently.
Apparently.
Well, there are some other general features like their Xcode, which is their IDE. I have no idea how good it is. If somebody wants me to try all this stuff, they can send me a donation in iPads, MacBooks, and I can check all this stuff out myself. Or if you don't need to. I won't mind.
Well, to be fair, I don't think I know of a single Apple app developer that has developed at least an app for a while that actually likes Xcode.
I don't know anyone either.
Yeah.
But now Xcode has wipe coding features. This is my interpretation of it, because it has similar features as Cursor and Visual Studio Code's Copilot.
Okay.
Just inside Xcode. So I just named it wipe coding because I really do not want to go into what the hell is happening there. AI stuff.
I mean, if we want to talk about AI stuff, they did talk about some improvements coming to Apple Intelligence when it comes around to like the concept of live translations of speech and text, which is generally a
really good.
Generally,
that is a
good
good
thing.
Good use of AI.
They also
wholeheartedly support it.
They also added the ability to do some image processing to make backgrounds for group chats.
Yes, and create
not as
emojis.
Useful. Yeah. Not as
by
useful.
By mixing two emojis together. Very useful. Now, they also, and this is something I watched today, they also added containerization.
Oh. Ooh. Did they implement Docker? Even though Docker's been available for macOS forever?
Yes. It was Docker desktop, it started a VM,
Okay.
You could use CLI, everything works just fine.
Now,
just like on Windows, not like on Linux.
I remember you talking to this before we started recording. You said that they were Linux containers that you could run, as well as Apple app containers. So
No, just Linux containers. Linux containers.
Okay. Now, obviously, Linux containers are very Linux specific, and even though
you need a Linux kernel to run a Linux container,
yeah, so
no way around it.
So obviously they have a Linux kernel that they're using for this feature. But then you said something that got me interesting. So, can we, first of all, figure out just how efficient they're being about this, right? Because obviously, one of these days we need to do a talk about like the difference between like a container and a virtual machine. But obviously, they're not going to be running the Linux kernel natively on macOS. They're going to be wrapping it into a virtual machine because that just makes sense. Because Microsoft tried that and it did not work.
we know it didn't work. They tried that.
Yeah.
Or they tried doing the calls, not the kernel, but the calls into it, and it didn't work at all.
Yeah.
But what Apple is doing is something I consider so cursed is insane. They are running, albeit a lightweight, VM for every single container. So you start a Alpine container, you get a VM. You start beside it a Postgres container, you get a VM. You start a, I don't know, Docker Compose. Of course, you cannot use Compose. At least they didn't mention you can use Compose because you have their own CLI. You start five different containers, you get 5 different VMs.
Okay.
Which means, and yes, they are removing most of the things from the VMs, like libc, like core utils, but what remains there is still there, and it is at least statically compiled.
So, this is definitely some kind of severe isolation for the sake of security. It's not lazy
Yes.
programming at all, we swear.
Yes. Let's, for example, look at how Microsoft did WSL2, which is supposed technically is basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Except they use one VM. Even if you have 20 different instances of WSL active at the same time, which, by the way, means you have 40 instances of WSL active at the same time, because each WSL instance also gets its little utility instance as well, which also has things like Wayland server inside.
Yeah.
And RDP server, and so on. So when you combine it, but it's all one VM. What that they are using to make this work? Linux namespaces. Same technology that runs Docker, that runs Podman, that runs containers. And then they made it work so you can run containers inside WSL. Why? Because, well, namespaces.
I mean,
You can make them work.
and even then, so many people are like working on developing Linux containers because containers have been such a game changer for like the server space in general.
Yes.
That it would make sense that Microsoft would, if Microsoft is going to be implementing a Linux runtime environment into Windows to begin with, they're going to have that container support there because that's what
Yes.
people want to use.
And that's why Apple is doing this, because they want developers to stay on Apple, because containers rule the world in everywhere except desktop. Did you know, fun fact, that containers, or at least their primitives, are used in embedded devices
Well,
for security purposes?
I have no doubt about that because I have been messing around with Home Assistant, which has recently deprecated like their container image, and so I've been playing around with like the Home Assistant OS, which is basically just like their application specific operating system.
Yeah.
And it is a minimum viable Linux boot environment that boots into a container image to operate Home Assistant that acts as a maintainer of a Docker control server, which then, for every integration and plugin that you add into Home Assistant, is a separate Docker container.
Yes.
So
They are insanely useful. Like namespaces, C groups, these things are insanely useful. Like, I bet if they went to 21st century, so to say, vehicle manufacturers would be using namespaces. And I know that embedded devices that run some sort of Linux run namespaces.
yeah, and in general, it's just like a very useful feature that the kernel has, because the big thing, it used to be that you would have to run that in like a dedicated virtual machine or have a whole separate box for that. Now, that comes with an overhead cost on your systems that containers just don't have, because now you're not having to worry about loading up a kernel with all the drivers that's coming prepackaged with, no matter what operating system is. All kernels have drivers. and this having a running and operating a net system on it, and all the other associated stuff. You just don't have that overhead there. Instead, you have just enough of an environment to have the application running with all its dependencies. And I've seen this happen with it's game servers specifically, like those old game servers, because all game servers run on Linux, because why wouldn't you run on Linux for a server? And it's been a great way that like communities have found to like keep these old online game servers actually running for like the community servers. Like I have a friend that runs a Star Wars Galaxy private server just for himself. Star Wars Galaxy only runs on Debian 8 and older.
Yeah.
That's old stuff. But you can get all that stuff packaged up into a nice little container and run it on your modern operating system and not have to worry about all the potential security issues. That
I think we stalled way too long about containers, but before we continue with our really topic, I would like to have a bit of a ask for Linux community, specifically Linux desktop community.
Uh-oh.
You heard us. How awesome namespaces and containers are. Please get on with the program.
Obviously, if you're a desktop user, the quickest way to do it is to mess around with like these universal packaging formats. Your app images, your Flatpaks, your snaps. That's an intro to the rabbit hole that can be containers, because you can go to YouTube and type in "what is Docker" and you will get a video that will completely blow your mind.
Yes.
Not out of just like amazement, but blow your mind as in you do not know what's going on.
Yes. And then if you want a bit more openness, you can install Docker, Podman, and something called DistroBox, and you can get as many shells with as many X servers, Valence servers as you want, so then you can run from any container, any program, like they are on your own system, directly on your own namespace.
Yeah. So
fun stuff.
if you haven't messed around with this stuff and you're curious, there's nothing stopping you, because at the end of the day, it's all MIT and GPL. So just use it. Of course.
Or maybe some stuff is BSD 0 or BSD 3 class, so basically the same thing.
Speaking of containers today, though, Bigpod, you rebooted our Nginx container on Tuckspace because you were working on a couple things, and that led to a discovery. Now, we did the responsible thing. We pre-announced that there's going to be a few minutes of downtime on our web server today, but it kind of spiraled beyond expectations. So, Bigpod, first of all, we need to figure out what we saw when you started doing this, our path to figuring it out, and ultimately what our solution was. That's the order that we need to go here, because it's going to spiral, and I need you to keep yourself contained while you go through this, because you were the one working on all this. I was just sitting here looking at tech news.
So, today is 11th of June, I think. June. I always miss the June, July, which one is which, so I think it's June.
It is June.
No, it was actually 10th when this happened, because 11th is after midnight for me. So 10th of June. I posted on Discord, in the show notes, you can find Discord link. I posted, there will be intermittent downtime during maintenance window of 2 hours. I wasn't 20 minutes in, and the website was totally trashed. There was nothing I could do. And the fun part was I was at a bar / inn, sitting outside in at the time still somewhat sunny day, closing into the evening, on my laptop, lazily trying to get things to just update, get new features in, the normal stuff, lazy, slow, and it didn't take long for me to go from I'm gonna slowly update this to oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Why the fuck is this not working anymore? And what caused everything to go boom? I did a actually not a container.
Oh,
Nginx is installed on the system. I did a sudo systemctl restart nginx, and everything went bye bye.
right. Now, obviously, what happened is because at this point I was hearing him panic, and then I can't. He asked me to access the website, so I go to tuxbase.com because that's our website. Front page loads perfectly fine. I'm like, okay, let's click that very first link that's on tuxbase.com to our Castapod instance, the thing that maintains our podcast RSS feed for us. And I get a nice little sad robot face going like, something's wrong, because Castapod's real cute about it and everything. And I'm like, okay.
And it wasn't even the fully featured page because
Right?
CSS wasn't working.
Right. So, okay. So next, I went through a bit of a process myself because VPN shenanigans and how we access our own server. That's a story for another time when we actually get that stuff working.
While he did the VPN, he started to fix his own site, which wasn't broken. What I was doing was I was trying basic fixes. When that didn't work, I quickly packed everything up, paid the bill, and jumped on my bicycle and started racing toward home. So I could be in front of two screens, and I could maybe have a better grasp on reality. Well, what I think happened is that by me restarting Nginx, I unraveled the amazing cache we had, which was saving our life probably for at least few weeks, if not a month or more. As apparently my cache config is great.
Oh, okay.
It was serving things that weren't there anymore. Things weren't there anymore. Yes, like CSS files, they for some reason got recomputed. So did like JS files. They are minified versions of those, so they get sometimes recomputed. But well, Nginx cache kept serving them because they were in the cache. And when I restarted Nginx, cache invalidated.
Oh,
Bye bye CSS. And when I came home, I spent about another hour trying to figure what's wrong. I tried everything I could think of. And what I did at the end, I said, Josh, please do me a favor and snapshot the entire server.
which I
Because
did.
I'm gonna do some stupid shit right now to fix this. And at the end, I didn't have to do stupid shit. All I had to do was update the image that had Castapod in, and new fresh CSS files got repopulated in, and better yet, the actual page was pointing to right CSS files, and it's back online. Yay! So we went past our maintenance window for just 4 minutes.
Hey,
I am happy.
that's pretty good. Now, obviously, we're not doing the responsible thing and having like a nice little test server that we deploy things to first before we push them into the production server.
I don't think here that this would be helped with a
Yeah,
test server.
this would not be helping in this scenario. So, it just turns out that what was it? Just a bad configuration.
No, at one
Oh.
point, CSS either got changed somehow. Maybe things got recomputed. It happens, but the links for those CSS files in the actual HTML file never got changed, which they should have been changed, and
Yeah.
that caused the whole issue. So, what would actually solve this issue? in preparation. Maybe more updating because we were behind on versions.
Yeah.
But more
Yes.
importantly, high availability. But for that, we need something called donations.
Well,
So check out Patreon right below me. Please send us a couple of bucks every month. So I can finally get that high availability setup I really want.
But I like our nice little $10 VPS running on a server in a data center that claims that it's in a certain specific geographic environment, but we don't know where it is and all that stuff.
Then we would have two.
Yeah.
That would only then we have two, and they would be completely the same, except they would be separately configured. AKA, I would then probably set up something Ansible to do it for me.
Of course.
But at the end of the day, it would be basically same configuration, just separately configured, so that this kind of things doesn't happen again. And a nice, good proxy setup, so that it sure doesn't happen. Apparently, I have a good cache config. That's still amazes me because I don't know cache at all.
It worked well enough for things to work without us noticing. So that means
Yes.
that cache worked, boys.
In the history of this podcast, cache saved us twice
Yep.
already, and I'm really amazed with it. So now I think we have some other topics to discuss
Yeah, well, we're just
on
gonna
a quick scale.
we're just gonna
Really
talk about
quick.
a couple topics here. First of all, Bigpod, I know that you're a big fan of watching the AI market space and like what all these big AI companies are doing, right?
AI, watching AI, maybe using AI, bit less.
Well, like the biggest news
Things
in
need
it.
to improve.
Well, the biggest news of AI that was basically more like an eyebrow raiser, go like, huh, kind of deal than anything else was OpenAI paying Google to, host their make use of their compute infrastructure to help
Yeah,
OpenAI run ChatGPT.
Knowing what I know about AI market today, this is a bit of a strange thing because, well, first of all, Gemini is the probably one of the biggest competitors of OpenAI's ChatGPT.
In fact, I would think from like just the general consumer market, it probably is the biggest competitor.
Yes. Then again, it's like SpaceX launching communication satellites.
Yep.
It is, well, even though SpaceX has Starlink, doesn't mean you cannot use our rockets. So maybe Google thinks of it the same way. Even though we have Gemini, doesn't mean you cannot use our servers.
Hey, they're paying Google to use their servers, so I don't think Google really cares that much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on other news, we have feature updates already being announced for Ubuntu's 25.10 release. This is now a quick reminder for everybody. This is 25.10. It's not 26.04,
26.04.
even year 4.4. That's the
Yes.
one release of Ubuntu that actually matters. This is a point release.
Yeah.
This is where they're allowed to experiment with things.
This is actually the test release, if you really think about it.
Yeah, because
it's the release for testing.
Yeah, this is
because
the one-
last one before our LTS is
Yeah,
always
so-
chock full of testing.
Yeah, we might not see like brand new alpha quality things in this kind of release, but we're going to see some changes that may or may not be for the better, or some changes where it's just like, hey, these are the things that we want to get some really early testing done because they're still a little bit new because they came out in the last release, and here's a couple updates for it. Let's see how well this works. This is at least beta, so
Yeah.
They came out and posted on the Ubuntu Discourse, which is where they make these official communications, especially about the desktop, that Gnome will not be compiled with X11 support.
Let's be clear, this still means it has support for X11 applications through Xvalent. Just has no X11 session support.
Yes. And in fact, Ubuntu is going so hard on this that they are removing Xorg server and all the related X utilities for the X server to operate out of the main Ubuntu repo into their universe repo.
Yeah.
Which is more or less like the community repo.
Yeah, and actually there is a actual reason for it that is completely logical. Since it's out of mainline Ubuntu, it's also out of main automatically. It's a standard thing.
Yeah.
As soon as it's like not necessary for it to operate Ubuntu, it is very likely gonna be out of main unless it's like some really big thing. I don't think core utils are out yet.
No, they're
even
not.
though they don't use or might not use core utils, but they probably won't be out for quite a while because they're still at least partially important components.
Yeah, now obviously they're saying that if you still want to make use of Xorg, just use other desktop environments. They're fine. Which, if you're using desktop Ubuntu, I believe desktop Ubuntu ships with Universe enabled out of the box, so it should just you should just be able to install it. Now, obviously, this is not the first time Ubuntu has disabled X11 before. It's just that this is the first time after a series of Ubuntu releases where it's been Wayland by default, and now they're just going. And obviously, if this ultimately turns out to just not work for them, they still have that the window of time for them to just put it back the way it was and just accept the maintenance burden that they don't really want to take on, but for reasons they still have to take it on.
It's important to also know that Gnome is deprecating X11 support as well in close time. But let me remind you, if you've been running mainline Gnome, so Gnome with Ubuntu, Ubuntu with Gnome, and you haven't explicitly went to Xorg session, so click the cogwheel, chose Ubuntu on Xorg, you've been running Wayland. So, if you didn't have any issues, this shouldn't change things for you at all. This just means that there won't be that Ubuntu on Xorg choice at all. That's the only thing that's different.
Right? Now, since we mentioned the word Gnome, we have some Gnome news as well. Now, obviously, the Gnome project has had some funding issues. And that has led to them trying to find some new partners to help them at least with the infrastructure, because infrastructure is not cheap for a project the size of Gnome. And they got a new partner. It's AWS.
Yay, Jeff Bezos.
Yeah. Now, obviously, they're making use of the AWS open source credits program, which is basically just like AWS just voluntarily hosting GNOME stuff for them and allowing them to use their build servers, as well as be able to make use of
all sorts of open source, also all sorts of things that they host in AWS you can use for whatever needs that are fall within the usage of open source project would need. So, for example, you can deploy a bunch of build servers.
This also allows them to modernize the architecture of their system, because prior to this, everything was running on an OpenShift server on a hyper-converged setup. Basically meaning everything was running on one box.
Oh god, yeah. Well, not necessarily one box, but probably a couple of boxes.
Yeah.
That were basically tied together.
Yeah, so and if you're curious as to how it was architected, I do have the link to the GNOME blog post in the show notes. And then finally, we gotta talk about video games, because fancy new video game system came out and you can't buy it anymore because it's all sold out. The Nintendo Switch 2. There's been one issue that everybody's raised with it. and that's the battery indicator. It's just not reporting right. Well, Nintendo has acknowledged the issue, and they have told you how to fix it. So, good on you.
Well, there is something else,
Oh,
and
okay.
a lot of you will think that I'm joking when I say this, because a lot of you will think that this is a mistake, but apparently, Salesforce has configuration mistakes according to
Uh-oh.
researchers. Well, on the other hand, a lot of people will say Salesforce in itself is a mistake, but let's be a bit charitable here.
Okay, so what it is that some researchers did like their due diligence, right? And they came around, they started poking around like the Salesforce because I guess that Salesforce paid for an audit. And these guys came out and said, "Hey, Salesforce, good job on getting this all running, but we have found over 20 configuration mistakes, five pretty nasty CVEs, pretty
Yeah.
nasty."
And this is specifically on Salesforce Industry Cloud or Salesforce Industries. So not your local setup, but the cloud version of it.
Yeah. Now, they did not. I don't think that they actually made a response to like these researchers, but oh wait, yes. A Salesforce spokesperson has told the Hacker News, which is where we found this from, that the vast majority of issues stem from consumer configuration issues and are not vulnerabilities inherent to the application. All issues identified in this research have been resolved with patches made available to customers and official documentation updated to reflect complete configuration functionality. Something tells me that they have some pretty concerning default settings, and nobody's changed everything away from the default settings like they are apparently expected to.
Yeah, a lot of Salesforce customers basically configure a lot of things, or at least should, because it is supposed to be like very configurable or something like that. Let's be clear, all I hear about Salesforce are not exactly very happy things.
Yeah,
And
I know.
and it's
I was not a
apparently
big fan
quite
of it.
expensive.
Yeah, I know.
So
I know that back when I was doing like business owner related things, I had Salesforce call me, and
oh
I didn't give two craps of whatever that lady told me because it's just like my servers run on stuff that I know and understand, and I only need like two things, so I don't care.
yeah.
So, anyways, guys, if you have some feedback for us, we have this email link, contact@tuxspace.com. That is our official conversation link. You send the email to that. Don't send it to like my personal email address, because for some reason people still do that. Don't send it to that one. Send it to contact@tuxspace.com. And if you're wanting to sell us a product, go to tuxspace.com and tell me what color the background is in that email. That way, I can at least confirm that you looked at it.
If you want to check out some other content produced by two of us, while Josh shoos away cats, if you want to check some other content made by the two of us, whether most likely separate, you can check out our YouTube channels. Neither one of us made content very recently, but at least this is the content.
It's been a while. It's been like a year since I actually uploaded a video.
Yeah.
I have done a couple live
Me
streams,
too.
but like an actual year.
Long time.
Yeah, real
Well-
life, man. It's been a pain.
Again, if you want to help us out, check out our Patreon, subscribe. You get a very great premium feed, which sometimes also includes very great pre-shows. If you remember to press the record button when we start talking to each other.
Of course. It would have been pretty spicy today.
Yeah, and you also get a high bitrate version of the podcast with up to 320 kilobits per second. Or kilobytes.
That's the maximum what OBS records.
I know nothing.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the maximum my editor supports. And you can also check us out on our social media. We're currently mostly advertising only the federated social media, but if you know our names, you can probably find us anywhere else as well.
Yeah,
and follow us there.
Technically, there is no tux allowed on Twitter.
Yes.
We did buy that just in case.
And there is a Bigpod and probably 10LJ somewhere there.
Yeah, I know that there's a 10LJ because I get on there and I just pick fights with people because that's.
And
just
there
what
is
you
a
do on
Bigpod 9.8 because Bigpod was taken.
Yep.
So I think I haven't forgotten anything else, have I?
I think that's everything. I'm glad you remember that because I almost forgot. But hey, that's fine. If you guys would like to talk with each other, we mentioned this earlier in the show. We do have a Discord link in the description. Yeah. I'm not willing to pay Discord for like the fancy links. Just that reminder that we could just set up like a simple redirect from it in Nginx to do that for us. That way
I'm gonna put
Discord
it into my
yeah, put it in your to-do
things.
list. Yeah, put it in your to-do list. Get that fixed after we fix the VPN bullcrap. That's apparently not broke, but is broke.
That's also.
But anyways, guys, we're going to clock out for the night. I'm going to cook some dinner. Bigpod's probably going to go to bed. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.